Hello my dear friends, you're in the middle of a summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the United States of America, where the final day of voting has begun. Today we're going to find out who is going to be the next president of the United States of America, and most likely tomorrow on the 6th of November we will know for sure whether the special military operation in Ukraine and war in Ukraine would be finished by the end of January or in the beginning of 2025, or this war is going to be endless. Everything depends on the next president. As for some stakes, according to information we have and according to ABC News reports, Trump has a 53% chance of winning. As for Harris, she has just a 47%. So, but we know that anything can be changed. We saw lots of manipulations, for example, in Moldova, in Georgia, and we saw that when the pro-Russian candidates were winning, but during the last hours, according to recalculations of the voting papers, we saw that the results changed significantly into completely opposite numbers. So that's why we need to wait till the last second, because everything can be changed even during the final minute of voting day. Now let's talk about Europe, about Ukraine, because every single person, every single leader of European Union and Zelensky himself, everybody is waiting for the results of the United States, let's say, president elections, because everything depends on this process. And Zelensky understands that most likely, if Trump wins, he's gonna have significant problems. As for Russia, telling the truth, we see that they don't care about who is going to be the next president of the United States of America, because we see that the Russians have just one problem: they need to complete the special military operation, and they need to finish every single task. As for the task and as for the situation on the ground, we have reports that the El Paris, the France paper reported that without U.S. help, Zelensky will probably have a sign a capitulation. But for now, he has support, and we know that recently the Western countries sent Ukrainians additional 200 and a little bit more strikers, armored vehicles. So most likely during the next few days, the Ukrainians are planning to conduct several counterattacks, or the Ukrainians are planning to reinforce the Sudzha direction with the purpose not to allow the Russians to take under control this territory. So let's begin with the Sudzha area, and today we got the video of how the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions in the vicinity of the village by the name of Kyanitsa. I'll remind you that just yesterday we got the video of how the Russians, as a result of reconnaissance operation, managed to discover the base of the 82nd Air Assault Brigade of the Armored Forces of Ukraine, and after that the Russians began bombing and attacking this territory with Iskander missiles. And as a result of attack of 4 Iskander missiles, the Ukrainians suffered the significant losses. The sources are saying that once again Ukrainians lost up to 10 personnel carriers, 3 Bradley infantry fighting vehicles, 2 tanks, several howitzers, and of course the significant number of soldiers. And today the Russians continue bombing and attacking this territory. And as for the 5th of November, the main purpose of these attacks with the cluster rounds was to not allow the Ukrainians to conduct successful evacuation. There are lots of wounded people, lots of wounded soldiers. They need support, they need help, they need medical care, but the Russians are bombing this territory, trying to not allow the Ukrainians to restore combat capabilities of forces in this direction, with the purpose not to allow them to send additional forces inside of the Kursk region. As for this territory, according to the geolocations we've been receiving for the previous several days, we can make a conclusion that currently the Russians are planning to attack 2 villages, Darina and Nikolaeva Darina. As for the North Korean troopers, we still haven't seen anything on the ground in the Kursk direction, but Zelensky continued talking that there are lots of Korean forces. Zelensky reported that they managed to calculate up to 11 North Korean troops in the Kursk region, and he says that West is silent. And we understand that West is not going to say anything, because if Western countries allow the Ukrainians to attack DPRK forces on territory of Russia that are not involved in, let's say, combat with Ukrainians, this can lead to a real war, at least between Ukraine and DPRK. And nobody wants this. Everybody is waiting when the Russians are going to begin using DPRK forces against Ukraine, and only after this moment the Ukrainians would be allowed to attack them back. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Kupyansk direction. As for the northern, we have several updates, but we will miss them. As for the southern, we got changes on the ground. During the previous night, we got several videos that were published by the Ukrainian forces of how they were trying to repel Russian attacks. And we have real dynamic in this area. The southern Kupyansk direction has dynamic, not so fast. The situation is developing here not so fast as we can see in the Pokrovsk direction, but even here we can see additional progress almost every single day. And as for the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to improve their positions to the southeast of the village by the name of Yampolovka. There was a very huge Russian, let's say, armored vehicle attack that Ukrainians were trying to stop. Now let's talk about the Seversk direction because we have some changes on the ground. These changes are very weird and I'll try to explain to you why. The Ukrainian sources of the 54th Mechanized Brigade published the video of how they were FPV droning and attacking the Russian forces on the territory of this settlement. A few things that I would like to point your attention. First of all, this area is the zone of responsibilities of the 10th Mountain Assault Brigade, but for some reason the force of 54th Mechanized Brigade were attacking the Russians. Based on this video, most of the mappers have adjusted their maps in Russian favor. But the problem is that the Russians if the Russians are not able to take under control company stronghold that located to the northwest of the Ivanivka village, then most likely the Russians would be forced to fall back from Ivanivka once again in the southern direction. This village of Ivanivka was captured by the Russians during the previous period of special military operation for several times. Now let's discuss everything in details. This Russian operation started somewhere on the 31st of October. And on the 31st of October, the Russians attacked the position of the 10th Mountain Assault Brigade with the use of 4 Iskander missiles. The Russians attacked the base of the 10th Mountain Assault Brigade and the Ukrainians suffered significant losses. And of course, the 10th Mountain Assault Brigade lost its combat capabilities. After this brigade was out of the game, the Russians began the artillery preparation. And for example, in this video that was published on the 2nd of November, we can see how the Russian artillery forces or test flamethrower systems were bombing and attacking company stronghold that is located to the northwest of Ivanivka. After the Russians finished the artillery preparation, they began the ground operation with a significant number of armored vehicles that were attacking Ukrainian positions, mainly of 10th Mountain Assault Brigade and 54th. We don't know for sure. This video was published on the 3rd of November, and after this video we start receiving any updates about additional progress. And if you remember, we were talking most likely during the next several days we're gonna receive something. And you see, today on the 5th of November we got the first videos that confirm that Russian attack was successful and that at least the Russians managed to answer the village itself. But once again, if the Russians want to be successful for 100%, they need to take the stronghold. Without the stronghold, most likely they would be forced to fall back once again in the direction of the railways. So let's wait, and we are waiting for some geolocations exactly from this company stronghold. If we get them, then we can say that the Russian attack was really successful. If not, then it's not a success. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Pokrovsk direction, because in this area we have a lot of changes on the ground, and now we understand the primary target, the current Russian task. At least everything is clear for the villages of Novodmitrivka and Novoalexeyevka. These two villages are primary target for the Russians. The Russians are moving in Novoalexeyevka in the western direction, and telling the truth, right before I start making the video, we got the first report or the second report that the Russians managed to take the village under complete control. Maybe today we're going to receive some geolocations, or maybe the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation will confirm this. Anyway, let's wait for this. The primary target, the first task for the Russians is to reach this red line. If they can do this, then the Russians will be able to cut the supply and support of this complex network of the fortifications. On the other side, in the southern direction, we can see that the Russians are moving also in the direction of Zarya, and we have geolocation that confirm additional Russian progress. For example, in this video we can see the work of Ukrainian tank that was attacking or counter-attacking the Russian positions on the territory of the village within a very short distance. The Ukrainians basically were destroying Russian positions. We don't know for sure how this battle was finished because the video was published by pro-Ukrainian sources. Anyway, based on this video, most of the mappers have adjusted their maps in Russian favor. We are talking about this central part of the settlement, but it's already central part, but it's already let's say on Ukrainian side of the road that goes between Solntsevka and Selidovo itself. So this is very important progress. And as for this direction, the primary task for the Russians is to take under control these territories. So summarizing everything, we can see that the Russians decided not to attack, not to storm this complex network of the fortifications, but the Russians decided to outflank, to cut from supply and support, and probably to create another Cauldron. This is a very important and very powerful, let's say, network of fortifications, of strongholds, and if the Russians are able to take them under control, of course this might be a very powerful base before further offensive operation in any direction, like in the northern, in the western, or in the southern or the southwestern. Now let's talk about the Kurakhove direction. During the previous 24 hours, we got some changes on the ground according to neutral mappers. Even pro-Ukrainian mappers, yes, and pro-Ukrainians are saying that as a result of clashes, the Ukrainians lost control over the western part of Vovchinka and over the village of Stepanovka itself. Now the clashes are taking place for the village of Ilinka and Berestki. And telling the truth, right before also start making the video, we got some reports, as for now just from unconfirmed, let's say, sources, that the Russians captured both villages already. So most likely the edge Russian positions are already somewhere in the vicinity of Staroy Terny. So let's wait for the upcoming 24 hours, and most likely we're going to have additional changes on the ground. Now let's talk about the South Donetsk direction, where the Russians continue offensive, and the sources are saying that there are very heavy clashes and that the situation for the Ukrainians in the villages like Ilinka, Elizavetovka, and the most important Antonovka is critical. At least this information was confirmed by the 79th Air Assault Brigade. They're saying that they're done. The Ukrainians are saying that they're done in this direction, that the Russians managed to break through the defense in several areas, and that the situation is critical, and the only thing Ukrainians can do right now is to retreat and to save their lives. So probably today we're going to receive videos with flags and many other things. Of course, the Russians will try to do this during the president elections of the United States of America. As for different changes, some Russian resources, we can't call them like let's say reliable, but they are saying that the southeastern part of Elizavetovka is also already under complete Russian control. As for important updates today, the pro-Ukraine mappers also colored in Russian favor this dense network of the fortifications between Bagayavlenka and Vadiana. This is very important strongholds area, and this area is from now on under complete Russian control. At least that was stated by pro-Ukrainian mappers. So the situation, as you can see, indeed very critical for the Ukrainians, and nobody can tell for sure how exactly the Ukrainians are planning to slow the Russians down. And of course, we will finish the video with the Orekhov direction, where the Russians also managed to improve their positions between the village of Kopony and Novodanilovka. In this video, we can see how the Ukrainians of the 65th Mechanized Brigade were bombing and attacking the Russian forces exactly in this point. Based on this video, we have adjusted this part of Zaporozhye direction in Russian favor. And I'll remind you that for the previous 2 weeks, lots of very reliable sources have been talking a lot about possible Russian Zaporozhye offensive, and this advance between Novodanilovka and Kopony might be the first step of this offensive. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.